maybe that's just one other thing I could digress into quickly, which is, again, according to psychoanalytic theory, one of the definitions that I mentioned earlier in terms of like the way we feel about ourselves, is based on how others see us, right, and respond to us. And then we gave that example with the scratching the knee, right, falling down and scratching his knee. But one other thing that our sense of self is also based on in a moment of vulnerability and distress, she's overwhelmed about what happened at work, beta element. She doesn't know how to make sense of this. She turns to the mother, and the mother responds with a dismissive and invalidating remark. More beta elements. So now the poor woman is flooded with these sensory experiences that she does not know how to digest. She doesn't have the language. She's not helped with the language. So what does she need to do? When the patient achieves something of significance, we said this already, I'm just reviewing, and you said it, Christina, the mother's habit of taking credit for it, right, and diminishing her accomplishments, so the patient doesn't know what to do with this. She doesn't have the language except to do what? Overachieve, like you said a moment ago. And that's the way this thing manifests. She has to write the perfect note, but there is no such thing as a perfect note, as we all know. So you can't actually write the perfect note. So then you end up falling behind, and you get yourself in trouble with your supervisor in this example. But the competitiveness of the mother could also contribute to this patient's sense of needing to constantly prove herself. And that is then the link right there between that, this is the way it manifests in this relentless pursuit of perfection, constantly needing to prove herself.
Right, and this kind of case can be in the clinic misleading when patients describe, well, it couldn't have been my father because he always told his friends or told our family how high achieving I was. But the part that goes missing, I think, is that part that you pointed out, that the parent is taking credit for it, the way they're announcing it. And that, yes. I think that can easily be missed, right?
Right. And it is missed because you picked up on this earlier on when you were trying to clarify, wait a second, does she come from a supportive family or not? This is getting confusing because it is missed, because this patient in particular, not all patients present this way, but she needed to hold the image in mind of the perfect childhood, right? The perfect family. And that's sort of, I think, what holds her together, right? Because if you can hold that image in mind, then you don't need to get into all this other stuff, which are really painful feelings of all the things we're mentioning, the competitiveness, being dismissed, unempathic responses, not feeling like you exist. Everything is taken over by your parent. That stuff is not pleasant to get into. It's much easier to write a perfect note, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the only thing that's blaring here is that, since we are talking about narcissism, is the example is of a narcissistic parent, the one who usurps the credit, who wants to be the one in power. Any of your accomplishments are because of me. This is classic narcissism, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it doesn't
I didn't want to label, I was hesitating to label the mother, but you're picking up on it only because she's not on my couch, so I don't really know what's going on. Oh, actually, maybe that's just one other thing I could digress into quickly, which is, again, according to psychoanalytic theory, one of the definitions that I mentioned earlier in terms of like the way we feel about ourselves, is based on how others see us, right, and respond to us. And then we gave that example with the scratching the knee, right, falling down and scratching his knee. But one other thing that our sense of self is also based on is how we perceive others are responding to us. So in other words, in part, there's some reality to this, of course. And when you hear enough of these stories, you can hear that there's a reality. But you have to keep in mind, if you're subscribing to the psychoanalytic theory, that we also treat some of this material as fantasy. Because when this stuff gets carried over to work, and there's this incredible fear that everybody at work is going to punish you. Remember I said I treated it psychoanalytically. I treated it like a fantasy rather than a reality. Because this is the way the patient would perceive these people in the environment to be behaving.